I think it's been the flavour through our conversation, but it is about voice, and it is about, how we support our community cooperative members to have a voice and give them the time and space to develop that voice to,
Hi, I'm Faye Minty and I'm the CEO of Enliven Community. As you probably know or may know, if you've watched any of our videos before, this is part of our podcast series called The Series, not surprisingly. And this is the opportunity that I get to talk about all things housing for people with disability and hopefully make a change or maybe share some information that helps somebody to resolve an issue around their housing. So this is podcast number 3, which is very exciting to do. And I'm joined here today by a very strong friend and colleague and collaborator, if I will, Chantelle Bester. So Chantelle, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to talk about our community cooperative. So Enliven Community is all about how people can change the way they live, as I said. And one of those things is that we know some people will share supports, some people will share housing, and some people will share supports and housing. And so that Enliven Community Cooperative, which is our idea about how the governance can be put in the hands of the people. And so I guess we're talking about today, as our community cooperative facilitator, what do you do? How do you do it? What's special about it? And what have you learned along the way? Yes. So I'm here with Chantelle, as I said, and we're basically, hang on a second, I was just thinking, how long have I known you for?
I'd say about 3 years. 3 years?
Yes, and we met when we were establishing probably our second or third cooperative, and I think we're pushing into about 14 now. So it's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It has, and I guess that was one of the things that drew me to you, Faye, and Enliven. I was working in a SIL provider, just the whole notion of a community cooperative was something that really excited me, and I had to be part of it. So
well, we hope it's going to excite lots of other people going forward too. So anyway, thank you for setting aside some time. I've got a list of questions that I've been told I need to ask. Great. So I guess actually, let's tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, so Chantelle, I've been in the sector for probably about 13 years now, so in a range of positions, state government. I've done work in senior leadership in SIL, support coordination, SDA, so really done the whole gamut of, NDIS, disability, and specifically around home and living. So really passionate about NDIS, working with people with disability and really getting them to a place where they've got full choice and control and a real voice in their service system.
Well, that's one of our themes, I think, today is about voices and how they're heard and what they say in the language, but we'll come back to that in a little while. So as a kind of a left, what is that the word for it? As a kind of an offside question there, who would you say has been the most influential person in your working life or personal life that's really influenced you about how you kind of come to the disability services sector and the services you provide for people?
Oh, look, there's been a couple. I think if I think back to a colleague that I worked closely with in one of my previous roles, extremely influential, extremely clever in the disability space. But what she brought to our relationship was a real understanding for me in terms of how you really take life to be life, and how you understand that we only get one go at life, and every moment counts. So she brought that to her professional career. She taught me how to bring it to my professional career and how to spread that through professional and personal life. So she's been quite influential in understanding how to lead and how to influence people to live their best life.
She sounds like a pretty impressive person.
She is.
Cool. Yes. Okay. So let's talk about the nitty-gritty of what we're here to talk about. So can you maybe in your own words explain the concept of a community cooperative and ultimately what a facilitator does and I guess share with people why we both think that this community cooperative idea is kind of one of the ideas that should go forward to the future.
Yeah. So I guess you said it before, Faye, you've got that situation where people with disabilities have that choice to share services, share housing, live independently, but still share share different supports to get that real bang for buck and value for money. A community cooperative, from the way I see it, brings individuals together in a community sense within the disability space. So, I'm really passionate about the separation of accommodation or tenancy and services and making sure that person with a disability is at the centre of that. And the community cooperative allows for that group setting, that shared knowledge, that shared understanding, and also allows for that capacity building in bringing voice to people with disability and supporting them to giving them the time and space to develop that voice and lead their own services.
You touched on something just then briefly, and I'm going to go back to it though. It's about there's the housing provider, and that's great. And then there's the support provider, and that's fabulous.
Yes.
But there's vested interests on both sides there because they're receiving a service. And so, the way they hear that voice might not be as clear. And I guess what we had envisaged in Enliven Community when we sort of went down this role, this pathway, was that this needed to be an independent voice. It needed to be an independent facilitator who really didn't have any skin in the game around, services or housing, but could actually force the housing provider and the support provider to listen.
Yes.
And if the housing provider and the support provider were the same organisation, that's even more important for the group, the people who are sharing those services, to have an independent voice, an independent facilitator.
Definitely. So I've seen too many times someone's tenancy at risk because the service provider wasn't necessarily the right fit for someone with a disability. So, the exciting thing about, number one, that separation of service is that, you've got that secure tenancy. You've also got secure services because it is separate. But also, coming together as a collective really allows that skill development and allows that individual voice across both sides. So, as a community cooperative facilitator, it is about understanding both individual need of the person or the community cooperative member, but also understanding that group need and supporting those conversations with the accommodation provider and also the support provider.
So I think in that community cooperative, there's that real concept of capacity building, and I think it's something we talk about in our sector a lot, but it's not something that's it is done. I'm not saying it's not done, and gosh knows there's enough support providers out there, providers who are doing that, focus on capacity building. But in this space, capacity building in that shared support space, I don't know that we've done a lot in that space.
We haven't. When we look at capacity building within the NDIS, it's still very disability focused. So, we look at capacity building in line with OTs and speeches and that real disability focused capacity building. What the community cooperative does is it normalises capacity building. The skills that the community cooperative are developing are very normalised in terms of everyday skills. So it's about, how to influence and lead and have difficult conversations and understand your needs in relation to your immediate environment. It's not about, how to use pro, low, quota, go. It's not about disability capacity building. It's about
skills, life.
It's life.
And we all need that, gosh knows,
Yes.
And that's true actually, because, much of what I've learned through my workplace. And for some people, if you're not exposed to a workplace, there's a kind of a gap in that skills building that you do. Like you spoke about, like team building, just being able to work alongside someone and tolerate their personalities, as we all do, and being able to still be able to compromise without acquiescing, without just giving up and just say, oh, whatever, but actually be able to say, oh, okay, well, if you can do that, I can do this. Yes. And those are really life skills that we all need to learn just to get along in life.
Yes.
We have spoken on many occasions about language, I have to say, and I'm really conscious of my choice of language at the moment and the concept of using that term, our tenants or our customers or our clients, and changing that around. But then when we've spoken to, you've also said that there's that twist that we now need to think about, that we as disability providers, in housing support providers, talk this particular language and we all know the shorthand and the jargon.
Yes.
And when people want to speak to us, they've got to learn ours
which is not necessarily right. So, and I think that's the other real benefit of, developing really strong community cooperatives in that, we can influence sector language. So a community cooperative itself can influence sector language. It's not about people with disabilities learning what economies of scale means or, what different language themes mean. It's about them directing what their language means. So if they want to ask for a service or direct a service, then let's pick up that language and let's really understand what that means in terms of a service model. And a community cooperative and an independent facilitator can actually make sure that we're stepping towards that.
Be that bridge, basically, of sort of translating and then reformatting, if you will, the way that's being heard. Yes. So part of that is, in your other world, you do support coordination, and I know that you're very good on that SDA space, which is also how we kind of get to know each other better. Yeah. What are you finding about the NDIS home and living, and what do you think that some of those biggest challenges and learnings that you're having at the moment in that space?
Yeah, so I guess, as you said, my other role is around that support coordination, specifically in home and living, with a strong SDA flavour. And one of the biggest challenges I find is that we're still trying to fit into already existing models. So we're still trying to fit our applications and our people that we're supporting into already existing models, where it's not necessarily the right way to go. It's about understanding someone's accommodation journey, and really developing what that model looks like around them. So, a classic example of how I've seen that go wrong is that, we might get a really successful SDA outcome for someone. They might be accepted as a tenant with an SDA provider, but then the on-site support provider doesn't necessarily agree that they can support them, and they won't bend or flex their model around what that person needs, and they then become the barrier in terms of that person living successfully. So that's a real issue that we continue to encounter, that there's no bend or flex to what the industry thinks is the way things should go. Whereas,
and that's that risk conversation that we've had on numerous occasions, that, the dignity of risk versus the responsibility for risk, or that duty of care, and who owns that risk. And that's some of the work that I know that we're sort of looking at doing into the future on that one. I know the other thing I did want to mention to you, so anybody who watched our podcast, if you've watched our podcast before, I spoke about Chantelle's great theory that we should have a community cooperative kind of forum, or and I've been sort of, as I talk to people around the place, I've been starting to really try to promote that idea, because no matter what we do, it's still me kind of leading something, and it's not the way it should be. My vision, and I think it's from what you said, is really about, what about people with disability coming together to talk to people with disability about these sorts of things, about voices, about governance, about risk, about how we want what the language is that we want to be used. In a housing context, of course, because that's really what brings us together. It's about bringing some of these ideas to life, and particularly that community cooperative, about how it doesn't belong to a provider. The idea of a community cooperative belongs to the people. And
I think, why I'm so passionate about that, those regular participant-driven forums, is because that's where you learn how different accommodation models can work. And that's how you learn how to bend and flex for the person's best interest, because, that starts conversations in terms of, we did it this way, we did it this way. Look, that could both work, but how about we do it this way? And so it's real, number one, participant-led, number two, co-design in a model. So it's where we're trying to head as an industry, and that in itself can provide that space to have those conversations.
Because that really leads on to one of the things I think we all noticed when the NDIS came into it, was that in the community sector, we used to kind of always work together, and we would share knowledge and information. And as the NDIS has come in, those opportunities are not so frequent yet. And so what we lost in our sector changing was our peer support networks of our colleagues in the sector. And really what we're trying to get, we know that we need it, but I also know that the customer group, the people that we serve, would equally benefit from a peer support network, which is what that really leads into, isn't it? Strong peer support networks for both providers and I'd say consumers or NDIS participants, so that we both kind of learn from each other all the way through. But definitely co-design is really big on the agenda, and it's big on our agenda through those cooperatives.
Well, and that's one of the big purposes of the cooperative, to design what that model looks like. And that's where that voice and that direction and that capacity building, that aspect, really helps that group of 10 people design their model.
So I guess, we've been, Enliven Communities had access to the 10+1 model of community cooperatives. But are you thinking that the community cooperatives could be, and should be, shared in the group home. And gosh knows I hate that word group home. It's individuals, it's shared housing. If we're normalising anything, it's shared housing. It's like university. It's shared housing. Yes. It's people with like-minded thoughts coming together to share some housing. But can you see this being useful in a shared housing environment?
Oh, definitely. So I think if you stick to that foundational notion of what that is, it's about giving voice, and it's about supporting our NDIS participants to not only have a voice but learn how to use that voice. So in any model, I think it's really important to look at how that can be facilitated. And I think, you know, in a smaller shared living space, which is your traditional group homes, there's still that opportunity to come together as a collective and understand how you operate your household. Same as, you know, if you share with 3 other university mates, you all come together and decide, we need a cleaner once a week because either we don't have the time or we don't have the care factor to clean our house back in the uni days. So let's all pitch in and have a cleaner. Same sort of notion.
Let's share the cost of that and get it done top to bottom once a week or something. Yeah. I actually think that in the shared housing, and that is such a crucial part, and particularly when that shared housing has actually got the support and the housing is the same provider, having that independent voice. I was going to say third voice, but it's really only a second voice in this case, having that independent voice working with the participants, and particularly around who is going to move into that spare bedroom now that Johnny's gone to Europe.
Yes.
Conversation that I can't wait to have, you know. So I'm all about the governance of how we share supports. But the next conversation that I really want to encourage is, and how do we fill that bedroom vacancy that we're now sharing a house? Who do we want to live with us, and who's responsible for finding that person to live with us? So, look, I've got my little wind-up things because I think that they're probably going to tell me to stop talking in a second. So, what do you, if there's something I haven't asked you about, what was your kind of take-home message that you'd like us to, or something you think we should know that we don't know?
Oh, look, I think it's been the flavour through our conversation, but it is about voice, and it is about, you know, how we support our community cooperative members to have a voice and give them the time and space to develop that voice too.
And that's that time and space. It's not a rush process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight.
It's not going to happen in a 12-month plan period. It's you know, the same as we all learn how to, you know, the way I manage my life now compared to when I was 18, very different. And it's taken me, I won't tell you how many years, but that's
one or two.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. But it won't happen in a 12-month plan period.
And what's one lesson that you think everybody should learn in their life? What is this, your roles to date taught you one lesson?
Oh, look, I think there's a couple of things, but look, one lesson is around how to be personable and how to be kind. And I think that takes you a long way, and particularly when we're working in the human services sector and we're working with people, really understanding who you are and understanding how you can be personable and kind to not just people we're supporting, but across the sector. I think that it's very underrated. Kindness.
I think so.
Yes.
And I don't think you can be too kind. I really don't. I think that compassion and kindness and understanding where we can all have bad days and yes. So I think that's probably our major things. I think we've shown them what a lovely, caring, compassionate, kind person you are, how well you understand community cooperatives and that vision for where they're going to. And I think my take-home message is really this community cooperative concept is not just about a certain model. It can be used across everything. And we'd be happy to share our knowledge, share our information, and as long as we get more people to start thinking about how do we put the power in the hands of the people that we are supporting, that are asking us and inviting us into their lives to make sure that dynamic is the right dynamic. And when we ask somebody to tell us something and to use their voice, we actually learn how to hear it.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us today. That's really cool.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so looking forward to kind of progressing that idea of a forum.
Yes.
I think that's going to be really fun. So, but in the meantime, we've got a lot of cooperatives to be working on and start sharing it. And sorry, one last thing. And I do know, like, we're not the only people that are working in this space. There are lots of people around Australia that are starting to really see this.
Yes.
And that's part of, we're trying to link in with as many people as possible in that space so that we keep sharing the knowledge and learning from others too.
Perfect.
That's it. So I get told that I have to, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, you need to hit that like button, you need to comment, and you need to share, and you need to subscribe. And if you can do all those things in one easy movement, that's great. And failing on that, we've got our next podcast coming up, which is really about, so you found your ideal home, and now there's that gap between getting an opportunity to move into there, moving into that home, and what is that transition period like? And I know you've gone through that a few times too, so we'll all be able to contribute to that conversation. Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to our next podcast. Thank you.